So my name is Sarah Oberbrunner, and welcome to the S Club podcast, where we talk about real life, relationships, and real estate. I'm here with Paul Margerie, owner of Margerie Law, and I did a post a couple months ago on social media regarding my personal estate appointment with Paul, and I was amazed at how many people had reached out looking for additional information on how to better protect their assets. So I couldn't think of somebody with more knowledge and expertise to have on than Paul to help break down this topic for us. So Paul, thanks so much for joining.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Margerie Law?
So I'm an attorney in Wauwatosa and Elm Grove. I have two offices, and my passion is helping people with their estate plans. The importance of it is something that is generational. So I just love meeting with people and learning their story and giving them options, talking through issues.
Okay. So I know a lot of times in life we truly come into our purpose and passion after we maybe experience a loss or a challenging situation in life. And I know that you lost your mom at a young age in college. So who was your mom, and what did that loss maybe inspire you for more passion and purpose in what you do today?
Wow, yeah. My mom passed. Well, there's no such thing as a good passing, right? So she died of brain cancer, and I was a senior in college, and I saw the pain and the difficulty something like that can cause. Nobody ever expects something's going to happen. Nobody expects a loved one to die, but it's coming for everybody, right? Nobody's getting out of here alive, and it's kind of a joke that I use with people, but it really kind of hits home that you've got to have a plan in place. You've got to think about not only yourself but the people that you leave behind. And I think if you do that, that really helps you take action. There's so many people that don't think it'll ever happen to them. People are going to live forever. I meet people all the time that, I'm almost shocked by their attitude of, well, I'm dead. What do I care? And if you don't think about your own mortality, I think you're doing a disservice to the people that you love and that you care for, because, when you're gone, they're the ones that are going to be holding the pieces, trying to figure out what to do.
So when I think of estate planning, I kind of think of it as something I would do maybe when I retire, when I have time. Or I think a lot of us think that we have so much time left. Is that some of the objections that you hear with people with estate planning? Yeah.
I all the time run into people that they say to me, oh, gosh, we've been meaning to do this for years. This is something that we've tried numerous times to do and we just never complete. I have people come into my office. They're like, well, I'm 82 years old and I decided today's the day.
Sure.
I'm like, all right, well, I hope you buy lottery tickets because you're really, really lucky, And I meet, young people, late 20s, early 30s, and they're like, this is really important. I've got a kid now. This is major adulting. I got to get organized. I got to get my life on track. So, there's no such thing as a good excuse. We never know when something's going to happen. And, a big part of estate planning is not only what happens to me when I'm gone, but it's what happens to me if I get sick or get hurt. Everybody in this room, statistically, you're going to get sick or get hurt long before you pass away. And I think if people knew that was important, they'd be banging down my door like crazy, because, if you don't have things in place, nobody can help you. You are stuck, and so is everybody else that cares about you.
So if I don't have something in place, who makes those decisions for me?
So, if you pass away and you have assets, those assets have to go through the probate court. And if you don't have a will, you die with what they call being intestate, which means the court goes through and distributes your assets by statute. So things are going to end up potentially where you don't want them to go. The court does not recognize, significant others. It doesn't recognize friends or charities. It's cut and dry. And, depending on how many descendants you have, how many relatives you have, suddenly your, second cousin is getting some of your money. It's probably not what you intended. And, if you get sick and get hurt, it's going to be your family going to the court, getting authorization to make these decisions. And that's just wasted time and money. If you're in a car accident, if you're in the hospital, you need people there making decisions, helping you out, not, okay, well, let's keep them on life support for 2 weeks and we'll see what we can do. That's pretty darn foolish.
So you mentioned probate. So what is probate and how do I avoid that?
So probate is the procedure in which your assets get distributed through the court.
Okay.
So on its face, probate serves a real legitimate purpose. If I gave you a pamphlet about probate and I said, take it home, call me in the morning, you'd call me and say, this is so well organized. I can't believe that this was actually thought through. And the intentions are entirely noble. The court wants to figure out who your relatives are. Let's gather the assets. Let's pay creditors. Hey, just because you died doesn't mean you skip out on your bills. And then what's left gets distributed. The problem that a lot of people have with probate is it's a lot of time and it's a lot of money to go through. Very simple probates are going to be 6 to 12 months. I meet people all the time. They're on year 2 of a probate.
Wow.
And it's going to be expensive. You have to pay some court fees. The more assets you have, the more you pay. That's not the big point of it. The big point of it is the attorney fees. Probate attorneys are not cheap. If you call up a probate attorney and just call up 5 and tell them your Aunt Janet died and you need help, I guarantee you most of them are going to say, okay, well, send me $5,000 and we're going to go from there. And at the end of the day, a little upfront planning with a much smaller cost is going to save all that back end time and money. You've got, if you pass away and you've got kids, that stuff's going to get tied up for quite some time. So it can what starts as a real organized process can get just really messy and chaotic for all the people that are directly involved.
And it sounds like a more costly. So even though if I take the time now to do estate planning, I may have some upfront costs.
Oh yeah.
But those are nowhere near.
Not even close.
Okay.
Not even close. It's the power of making your own decisions. Having things exactly the way you want. At a considerable less cost and frustration, worry, all these kind of things, you save it all on the back end. It's 2/3 of people don't have a will in place.
And why do you think that is?
I think it's a real lack of education.
Yeah.
I just don't think people don't think it's a big deal. People, again, don't think it's ever going to happen to them. I meet so many clients that are like, yeah, man, my relative had to go through a probate. I saw that was a total mess. I have to do everything I can to possibly avoid it. Well, unfortunately, if that's what requires you to take action, so be it. But it's just people don't think about those things. Again, it's never going to happen to me. What's the big deal? Well, it's not a big deal for you. You're dead. It's everybody else this is going to be a big deal for.
So I think if we think about it more that we're helping our loved ones, that would maybe get a lot of us more motivated
100%.
to do something like that.
100%.
So I think on our call or on our podcast today, we have a lot of different people on different ends of the spectrum with regards to their knowledge of estate planning. So we have people where this is probably the first conversation that they're hearing, and then some that be a little bit more well-versed in this. So I kind of want to talk about like some basic definitions. You brought up some stuff about probate. What is the difference between a will and a trust? I know I hear those definitions a lot.
So a will is nothing more than your written instructions as to who you want representing you when you pass away, where you want your assets to go. It's basically the way I describe it with my clients is, if you ever see in a movie or TV show where they're, have a will and they're reading the will and it's fancy letters, last will and testament. It literally should just say, "Dear Judge, comma." I mean, it's your love letter to the court, right? That is, if you do nothing else, congratulations, you're in probate. Okay.
Even with a will, I'm in probate.
With just a will.
Okay.
If you have a trust, that is a legal document that the intention of it, which this is a problem we can get into later, the intention of it is to have the trust control your assets. Nothing is left in your name. Since you don't have assets in your name, you can avoid the probate. So it's a way to bypass that.
Okay.
What people have to figure out is what makes the most sense for them. At the end of the day, probate is super important to try to avoid, and there's different ways to go about doing it. But I meet so many people that have a will. They've done nothing else. They were never educated. They were never told. And they say to me, here's my will. My lawyer says I'm going to avoid probate. Okay, well, let's talk about that a little more. Have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done this? No, I don't need to do that. Everything's all set. Okay. All right. I'm glad you're sitting down because this is now going to, I'm probably going to upset you and whatever because you're in probate. Right? So education. I mean, that's half of what my job is getting people where they need to be.
So like super important then again is for everybody to understand that the only way to avoid probate is to have a trust.
Well, there's two ways to avoid probate. So the first is we can have a will. And think again as the will as your intentions. We want to memorialize what you want. The way you can avoid probate with a will is by having beneficiaries on all of your assets. So, for example, if your will says, "Hey, I give everything to my wife, and then when we both pass away, everything goes to our kids." I mean, I have lots of clients that works tremendously well, perfect. They will avoid probate because we put beneficiaries on the assets. So it's putting, pay on death on bank accounts, putting beneficiaries on your 401k, your IRA, your life insurance. You can put a beneficiary on a house, and most people don't know you can do that. The goal of that is if everything has a beneficiary, then there's nothing that's left that has to go through probate. Your will, if you do it right, should never be used. You can almost think of it behind glass, break in case of emergency. And I have clients, and I use that all the time when I have clients that are older. So when mom and dad are 60 and 70 and they have kids in their 30s and 40s, and mom and dad say to me, "Hey, look, our kids are great. I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, we're totally cool with our kids inheriting. They're great people." Then let them inherit. We can bypass probate, put beneficiaries on the assets. And the great thing about that is, again, that probate 6 to 12 month kind of thing. We can start moving assets in like 2 weeks. That's how long it takes to get a death certificate. Right?
So with that beneficiary, if I'm adding somebody on my accounts and investments, do I need to have a will to do a beneficiary? Or is that something I can do regardless without a will?
They're completely separate.
Okay.
I would say they should go hand in hand. That's a great question that you just asked, because a lot of people, when I describe this process, their knee-jerk reaction is, well, then why do I need a will? Well, I'm going to still stress to you the importance of having a will because, well, what if you forgot something? If you need to be organized, and it's not a hard thing to do, but if you miss something, if you acquire an asset later and you never go back and put a beneficiary on, we better have a will then. So, it's smart, cheap insurance.
The beneficiary.
And having a will. The other way to avoid probate is just like what you said, the trust. And I do that all the time, but it's got to be for a reason. So I do trusts all the time when I have little kids, right? I got to set up a trust to protect that money for a long time, provide for those kids. But we want to make sure that we're getting the assets to them at ages that are appropriate. I do trusts all the time when I have adult children that are disabled, right? Because if you let your adult child inherit, they're probably going to lose any benefits they might be on. So if and when they burn through the money, there goes their social safety net. I think any parent who has a disabled child and has gone through that process, 90% of people get rejected the first time they apply for benefits. You got to appeal it. They're hard to get. And if you lose them, good luck ever trying to get them again. I do estate planning and trusts for a lot of people that don't have kids. Some people don't do estate planning because they're like, well, I don't have any kids. Well, it's really super important because, you probably have charities or significant others or friends or other family members. And, I do trust when someone comes to me and says, I don't have any kids, but I've got nieces and nephews. I've got some charities, a couple of friends at church that I want to provide for. A trust really makes a lot of sense for the administration. When I take your pie and I start cutting really small slices, it's just going to make it easier. Go back to my example of mom and dad with a couple of older kids.
Yeah.
You could go and put your kids' pay on death on the bank account. Kid 1, kid 2, done. But imagine going up to that same bank teller. Good morning. How are you today? Hey, I have 39 beneficiaries. Can you add them to my account? It just doesn't work.
So that's why you would have the will then for that.
Have the trust.
Or the trust. Okay.
Yep. So it is, I do my practice a lot different than most other attorneys. I do story-based planning. So what's the story? What do you need to get you where you need to be? It's not about assets. There's a real misconception that people have. People say, well, I don't have a lot of money, so I don't need anything. Well, that's bad. Or people say, I have a lot of assets, so I must need a trust. I must need this. No, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of attorneys, the first meeting that I have with a client, let's talk about your story. What are your goals? What are we trying to accomplish? Learn the background. That's going to tell us what's appropriate. Most attorneys, frankly, I'm a firm believer in this, they start the conversation, well, where are all your assets? How much is in your 401k? How much life insurance do you have? What's in the bank? That is not to try to figure out what you need. My opinion is that's entirely them trying to figure out what they can sell you. Because I meet people later on that have plans in place. And they actually sometimes start the conversation, well, do you need to know where all my assets are like the last guy? No, I don't. And then I'll look at their plan, and they'll have a plan that, why do they have this? I think a lot of attorneys probably do the, let's figure out what they have. Based on that, I can figure out what I can sell you. And then I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes scaring the hell out of you, and I'm going to sell you this.
Yeah.
Or you really don't have many assets, so I'm just going to get you a couple of basics and get you out the door. I review people's plans, like I said, all the time. And when I explain to them what they have, a common response I get from them is, that's not what I thought I had. Why do I have this? Really? Is that what this does? It's story-based planning. Everybody has a different story. Everybody's going to need a different plan. The goal is the same, but how we get there are different ways to do it. And I think that's the smart way to do it.
Yeah. Good stuff. I like that story. That's story-based.
Yeah.
That makes it less, I feel like, scary and overwhelming when you think of it that way.
Yeah. I think if you take it, a lot of people, I know a lot of people don't do estate planning because they think it's overly complicated. There's this huge mystery to it. And if you break it down into really simple concepts, simple steps you can take, we always have a good result. My clients just love work with me because it's easy to understand, and you want to see the value in what you have. You got to understand what you have. You got to know how it works. You got to know how to use it effectively. If you can't explain your estate plan at a cocktail party, now of course there's probably a couple of drinks before you start talking about that, right? But if you can't explain to someone what you have, you probably have the wrong plan.
Okay. So when we talked about trusts, I hear a lot irrevocable and revocable. What's the difference between the two?
So they are night and day. So most people, if they go with the trust route, they do what they call a revocable trust, and they'll have different names. They'll call them revocable living, family trusts.
Those are all mean the same thing.
All the same thing. Yeah, word salad. The point of that is these are your assets. We're putting them into a trust that you create while you're alive, and you're in total control of them. Changes nothing about the way you live. Everything that you did yesterday without a trust, you would do tomorrow with a trust.
Can I change that if it's revocable? Like, can I make changes on that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. You can make you could we could spend weeks setting it up, and then you sign it and you could tear it right in half if you wanted to. So you do whatever you want with it. Complete flexibility, super easy to use. And the revocable trust does absolutely nothing for you. It's all about the people you leave behind, the plan, making the plan for what you want to have happen. The irrevocable trust is really completely the opposite. It's a trust you create while you're alive. You put your assets into it. That's the same. The second you put your assets into them, they're not yours. You can't change your mind. You can't make changes. It's frozen. Most irrevocable trusts, in fact, aren't controlled by the person that created it. They put someone else in charge of it. And there's reasons for that.
I was going to say, why would somebody want that if you can't modify?
So I've had people contact me and they say, look, mom's getting to a point in her life, we're seeing her decline. You know, the doctors really haven't said she's full-blown dementia, but we see it coming. You know, and you see those sad stories in the news about, you know, people getting swindled out of their money. You know, their concern is, hey, if somebody calls mom up and says, Grandma, I need money, I'm in jail, she'll wire money, right? So we want to set up a plan to take the assets, put them in there, essentially take it away from her. The loving families, of course, is going to take care of her. They're going to be in charge of the trust, but mom can't do it, right? And I've had irrevocable trusts when there's like a medical issue. You know, I had a client, just a wonderful person, come to me and said, okay, well, I knew this was coming. This killed my grandma, this killed my mom, and it's going to kill me. And the doctor said that I better get things figured out because I wish this was a quick exit, but I'm also going to be probably incapacitated in the next 6 months, a year or so. I need to give everything to somebody else. I need them to take care of me. I just can't do it. Those are the extreme cases. The average person, if a trust makes sense, would go revocable.
Okay.
I have some people talk to me about, well, I really, want to give my assets. I'm thinking irrevocable is the way to go. I want to give my assets away. I don't want the government to get them. All these fears that they read on the internet. And please don't do your estate planning based on TikTok.
So that was one of my questions too, was that I'm sure a lot of these forms are accessible online.
A lot of them are.
Right.
The state will have, the state has, for example, a health and a financial POA if you want to use. Those are dangerous. Not that there's anything wrong with the form, but people just don't know how to fill them out. You could definitely go online and find a will maker and create your own will. And I run into people like that all the time that have tried that. Some people get so far and then they kind of freeze up and they're like, oh, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
It's probably a smart, trust your gut. And some people, set this up. I guess my concern for that is you're never going to know if you did it right. I can Google how to pull my own teeth, but I'm going to go to the dentist. So there are a lot of resources, but I think you really have to kind of vet the stuff. I mean, I have people come into my office and I saw on YouTube, I saw on TikTok, I read this on the internet. A lot of it's not going to be accurate. Maybe it works somewhere else. It doesn't work that way in Wisconsin. So you just got to be real careful about the content you take in.
I know I gifted my parents a session with you, and they had some estate planning set up prior. And after their appointment with you, it was like night and day. They were able to articulate what they had, and going into it, I think they felt kind of overwhelmed. But when they came out, I could see like a renewed sense of confidence just in them when they talked about it, knowing that they were actually able to be involved in that planning, and they really understood what they were doing.
Yeah, your folks are great, by the way.
I love them.
Yeah, I love them too. I hope to go fishing with your dad someday. And if he sees this, I mean that sincerely.
It's an invitation.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So that was a great example of just talking to your folks about what are their goals, what do they want to have accomplished, what's the best way to go about doing it, looking at options. You've got to have a plan that again gives you peace of mind. that you understand. If you don't understand what you have, you're not going to use it. I meet people all the time that, they bring in their documents for me to review. Some other person worked on it. And they are just stunned by, it's not going to work the way you thought it did. So, like your parents, going through the education, talking about that, the saying knowledge is power. I mean, there's nothing more important than that.
So I know a little bit ago you had mentioned healthcare power of attorney and then durable power of attorney. Can you explain what that is?
Sure.
Okay.
So the healthcare power of attorney is exactly that for healthcare. Who makes your decisions, who follows your wishes, HIPAA privacy, right? If you're in a car accident, you've got a lot of loving people going to the hospital, but no one's going to get the information necessary to be able to make decisions for you. And those are super important if you have an adult child. This time of year, I get real busy with kids going to college pretty soon because, again, being an adult, hey, I'm mom, I'm dad, that's fantastic, the doctor will tell you. But the doctor's also going to say, this person is an adult. How do we know that they want you making decisions for them? If you're in a long-term relationship, you have a significant other, you're not married, you better have powers of attorney. If we've lived together for 10 years, okay, you better have powers of attorney for each other because you cannot make decisions for each other.
And do I have to have a will to do that? To do a power of attorney, or is that something I do separately?
Totally separate.
Okay.
So think about the estate plan as kind of two sides of a coin. What happens to me when I'm alive? That's the health and the finances. Who's going to help me take care of me when I'm alive? And the other side of the coin is what happens to me when I pass away. And that's the will and the trust. Those are the two different sides.
So the power of attorney ceases when somebody passes away.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. The other power of attorney is that the financial power of attorney. It's called a durable power of attorney because that's used at all times, not just when you're incapacitated. I have older people that have durable powers of attorney, and they're great to use. I have clients that, they're in their 80s and 90s, and on a wintry day, if it's snowing, mom looks out the window, you fall on the ice, break a hip, that's a death sentence. So here's my power of attorney, kid, go to the bank, take care of this for me. Powers of attorney, though, end when you pass away. They're, you may as well just throw them in the trash. And that distinction is really important because I meet people all the time, with real estate. I'll have people come into my office. It's always a Monday morning. It's always in the summer.
Why Monday?
Because, you sell a house over the weekend,
Okay.
And the guy comes in and he's super excited. And he's like, hey, my mom just died. Hey, it's okay. We're doing fine. By the way, I just sold her house. I'm her power of attorney, so I signed everything. Okay. All right, well, let's sit down. Let's unpack this because you signed the contract using a power of attorney. Mom's dead, you said, so that is invalid. And the house is still in her name, so you're going to probate. Oh, wow, that's a
shocker.
That's a shocker. That's a shocker.
Yeah.
So definitely two sides of it.
So if I'm looking to designate somebody as a power of attorney or health attorney or healthcare attorney, what are some characteristics that I might look for when selecting somebody like that? Because it's responsibility.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question. So, the main thing is thinking about who would you want standing next to your hospital bed. You're not going to pick someone. They don't have to make any decisions. So you don't have to necessarily have someone that understands, medical issues and all that stuff. You're just looking for someone that can follow instructions, right?
With the healthcare part.
With the healthcare.
Yep. Okay.
You're the one making all the decisions. And I use this exercise with people. Sometimes when I talk about, you have to pick these people, a lot of people, when they go up to their person they'd like to make decisions, the person will be like, I'm not doing that. I'm not pulling the plug. No way. No. We're not asking you to make decisions. We're asking you to follow instructions. So pick someone that you trust. Pick someone that will do what you want, right? Because the doctors are going to tell them the issue. You know, it's not for them to diagnose and decide. This
Sure.
is clear cut.
So with that healthcare power of attorney, are they making those decisions based on something that I said for them to do, or no? Or it's just based on the doctor's directions?
So the healthcare power of attorney is the document where you name the people that you want making these decisions.
Okay.
So you're going to pick a primary. I always suggest to people, you know, have a backup too. Especially, you know, if it's a spouse, always have a backup, because what if you guys are in the same car accident, right? Now, you really have to look at the cards you've been dealt with, though. You know, your primary person, that's your person. That's the person, like I said, that you want standing next to the hospital bed. If your backup person isn't just as good as your first choice, I'm going to say they're a bad choice, right? I'll meet people that, you know, really go down the rabbit hole with this thing, and they'll give me a list of 10 people. I'm like, ooh, okay. You know, 6 through 10, if they were so good, you would have made them like 1 through, you know, 5 or something.
Usually the person we put in the top 3 spots are the ones
That's
that
enough.
we would trust. Yeah.
That's enough. And, you know, the reason why I suggest that too is because, you know, these are living documents. Just like you could change a will and a trust, you can change your POAs, right? So what you have to think about is, who are the best people right now? You know, that's going to change. People will come in and out of your life. People will die. People will get too old.
And again, I can modify that, right?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's not your forever plan. It's cheap and easy to make changes. So focus on the now. You know, that's just so important. And I think doing that helps people act, you know, get the stuff done. You know, they have a clear. If you're thinking about forever, you're never going to do it. You know, everybody has some pretty good ideas of if something happened today, this is the person. Well, there's your plan. How easy was that?
Yeah. I know when I had my appointment with you, I was kind of struggling going back and forth about a couple different people for these roles. And when you had said make the best decision for today, I felt like I could change it so it wasn't permanent, and I knew right away who those people were.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. You know, I run into people, and I can see it in their eyes as they're thinking about it. They're like, okay, it's got to be, it's got to be my little brother. He's the youngest person I know. I'll get the most years of service. If he's not the first person you thought of, he's a terrible choice, right? But maybe he'll age into it. You know, younger people. Maybe mom and dad are the best option. There's nothing wrong with that. But mom and dad are getting older. You know what? Their window's going to close someday. And when that happens, swap them out.
And then what about the financial power of attorney?
So the financial power of attorney, as I mentioned, is the durable. That's good at all times. That's the one that I like to use because it's good not only if you're incapacitated, it's good to be able to use it if you're just unable to. You know, my example of the older person, you know, with the snow and ice. I've had people use them when, you know, hey, they just moved up the closing and I'm selling my house and, oh, geez, I forgot I'm not going to be around. You know, that's appointing someone that can do all the things that you would do on a daily basis that you just can't. So that's, you know, who can go to the bank, who can call your insurance company, who could call your employer, who can call your financial advisor. You know, if you have a financial advisor, that person has to hang up the phone unless they know that you've authorized someone to talk on their behalf. So just super, super important stuff.
And again, I can have those without having a will. So that's something I could do today.
Absolutely. Yep. They're two different sides of it. You know, for when I talked about like adult kids, you know, going off to college, you know, your son going to college in the fall, he doesn't need a will, right? You got to have those powers of attorney though. And I've done them for clients and they've used them, you know, because, hey, what's the first thing you do when you're at college? Oh, let's go to a party, right? And something happens. You know, if you have an adult child and they have a bank account, you know, all their summer money that they worked for, you know how you fix that? You just put a beneficiary on it. You know, just put mom and dad as the beneficiary on the account. That'll take care of that. I'm not worried about a will.
And with that beneficiary, again, that doesn't cost anything. I just go right to the bank.
Go right to the bank. Absolutely. Super simple. You know, and different banks call it different things. Traditionally, it's called a pay on death. Some credit unions just call it a beneficiary. It's a word salad. Just start saying words to the bank teller until they realize what you want. It's so easy. And it costs you nothing. It's your own time.
And then for real estate, helping people a lot of times, like I do myself, with probably one of the biggest purchases that they're going to make, and they have those real estate investments. What's a way for them to protect that investment if something happens?
So that is just an awesome question, because this is probably the number one thing that people don't know. You can put a beneficiary on your real estate. Going back to the idea of probate, a lot of people have life insurance, they have a 401k, they have an IRA, and you're getting that through a professional or organization that understands the reason for it and understands the importance of a beneficiary. It's right there on the form. The two things that always end up in probate are bank accounts and real estate. When you open up a bank account, the bank does not ask you who your beneficiary should be. I have people that are shocked. They're like, I can put a beneficiary on my bank account?
I didn't know about that at all until after I met with you, and then I went that same week, and I didn't have any beneficiaries on my accounts at the bank.
The bank would love to have it tied up in probate.
Yeah.
Bank would love to sit on your money for 6 to 12 months. With your home, I meet older clients, and they're so organized. Everything's done. Mom has the knives and forks divided between the kids. Perfect. Never thought of the house. So it's called a transfer on death.
Okay.
It's a document that we create, and the trick to it is it has to be recorded at the courthouse while the person is still alive. And it's a document that just says, hey, you own the home. It lists your name. It says that you want the home to pass to, and you put down whoever you want, and it passes outside of probate. It is a fantastic vehicle to use, and there's a lot of reasons for it. I meet a lot of people who do, I guess, what I would call kitchen table lawyering. They think they recognize they have a problem, and they come up with their own solution. And the one that I see all the time is that mom and dad say, okay, our house is our biggest asset, and we want to make sure that that house goes to our kids. So their solution is, okay, if I'm in title and I add the kids to the title of the house, when I pass away, my kids still own the house. Hey, that's great. Look at what I just did. That's awesome. Yeah, it's going to work, but you've got some real issues. The first is, I don't want anyone owning your home except you. This is your home. This is your investment. You make the decisions. No one should have ownership rights. I love my kids to death. I have the best kids in the world, but they always think they know better than the old man, right? The second issue you have are creditor issues. So and I'm speaking, to mom and dad, if you put your kids on title and they buy lousy car insurance off of TV because it's a funny commercial, if their bills aren't getting paid, their creditors could attach to your house because you made him an owner of it. What do you mean? Jim hasn't lived here in 20 years. Well, you made him an owner. And the third reason is the taxes. So a lot of people who've owned their home for a long time, and with what you do, you see this every day, pricing in real estate. You've had considerable appreciation, right? If you add your kids to the title of your home while you're alive, they inherit your cost basis, which is what you paid for that home. Now, if you sold your home tomorrow, you probably won't pay any taxes. It's your primary residence, but it's not your kids. So they would inherit your cost basis. Let's say you bought it for $100, and now it's worth $500. When they go to sell that home, they're paying capital gains on that money.
And that's if I have somebody on title.
On title with you. By doing transfer on death, they don't get it until you die. They get it at that current value in the year that you passed away. And if they sell it for, that amount, that's tax-free money. So the trick for families is, you want to provide for your family, you want to get things to your kids. Awesome. Don't give them anything until you're dead, right? That's how we get around 90% of the taxes. Give everything to your kids. Don't give it to them until you pass away. Stay in control of your assets.
And that TOD then, that's not something I do at the bank. That would be with you.
It would be with me. Yep. It's
Approximate cost on something like that.
Oh,
$100, right?
Yeah,
It's not super expensive.
It's cheap. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a couple $100.
Yeah.
I have to go to the courthouse, get the information. I have to pay recording fees. But it's a small expense for, just imagine all that tax-free money. And another important thing to add to that is it is property specific. So if you own your home and then you go sell it and you want to buy a cute little condo somewhere, you got to do it on the next place. It doesn't transfer over. Think of it like that bank beneficiary. You know, if I have my beneficiary at this bank, but I close the accounts and I go to this bank, it just doesn't magically show up. I got to put it there. And it's got to be done, again, as I mentioned before, while you're alive.
But I can do it at any time. So if I don't have that on one of my properties now, I can just call you up and get that added.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I've had people call me up and say, hey, mom's in the hospital. She's, you know, there's a health issue. She could pass away pretty soon. You got to get that done. You got to get it recorded. I mean, I've had people, sadly, I mean, I got the things signed on Wednesday. I rushed it to the courthouse that same day, and they died on Friday. You know, and if we would have missed that window, it would have been for nothing. So, if you're going to do it, get it done ASAP.
Good. Well, Paul, thanks so much for all the valuable information and insight you provided. For all my guests, I like to ask one question that my mentor, Dan Sullivan, asks, and it's called the R Factor question. So what would need to happen for you both personally and professionally within the next year for you to feel like you made progress?
Wow. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This was great. I never thought I'd be on a podcast, I just love podcasts. So this is super cool. So that's a heck of a question. So, you know, my biggest job is to be a good husband and father. So if I can keep doing that, I've won at the game of life. I get emotional. I really do. Man. And then I think professionally, I think it's just, you know, working with, you know, keep helping people, keep educating, keep people getting them where they need to be. I mean, I love seeing people have a sense of relief. I love seeing people have confidence, you know, and that's just, it's the best part of my job. So if I can keep doing that, yeah, that's great.
All right. So we covered a lot of stuff today. And what would an appointment look like with you if somebody wants to schedule that? Like, do they need to have things prepared? What do you all cover? How does that look?
Sure. So, you know, the point of it is just making it easy. So, you know, people reach out to me through my website. They call my cell phone. If they contact me, they're talking to me. They're not going through staff. It's direct one-on-one. And, I mean, I just encourage anyone to come in. Let's sit down. Let's talk about your story. Let's talk about options. Let's try to figure out what your goals are. And, you know, that story-based planning, I can tell in the first 10 minutes what these people need. But it's going to be, you know, an hour appointment of us talking through different scenarios, making sure that I'm addressing their needs, just to get them where they need to be. Based on that, then I send people the homework. You know, and the homework is going to be, okay, this is what we decided is best for you and your family. You know, these are the jobs you need to fill. You know, who's going to be your guardian? Who's going to be your trustee for your kids? You know, the guardian raises your kids. The trustee is the person that's in charge of the money. For a lot of people, you know, my own personal plan, it's the same person. I trust you with my kids. I trust you with the money. Some people have different dynamics. You know, Judy gets the kids. She's an angel on earth. Wonderful. But maybe she's just not so good with money. Maybe someone else should be in charge of that. If you go down that route, then you just have to think about the relationship, right? Are they going to be able to work together? If they're going to argue, don't like each other, well, they're not helping your kids.
And you help ask like all these questions
Absolutely.
during an appointment.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff you brought up, I wouldn't have thought of. So it's good to know that you would kind of prompt with these questions.
Yep. It's all, again, it goes to the education. Think about this stuff. They're not hard decisions. They really aren't if you focus on the now, like we've been talking about. But you just got to think about, when you're gone, how does this play out? You get to write your final chapter. This is the cool thing about estate planning is you write your final chapter. If you don't do estate planning, well, the state's going to do it for you. And I've never had anyone say to me, well, they do such a good job with the highways. I think they can handle this too, right? It just doesn't happen. But it's filling the roles. Once I get their information back, I draft the documents. I send them to them for review. And here's probably, in my opinion, where besides story and not asset planning, this is, I think, where I differentiate from other attorneys. So, I want to go through these documents with people. I want them to ask questions. I want them to understand what they have. Let's make changes if we need to, because say suddenly I changed my mind. I want something different. But again, it's the power of knowing what you have, having what is appropriate, using it the right way. I mean, that gives people control. And then once we then meet to sign, I'm going to also help you a lot more than other people. I meet so many people that have plans in place, and they didn't, even though they had a will, they didn't do those beneficiaries, right? I meet people with wills that don't know about the bank. They didn't know about the house. That's a great example of probably someone didn't care about them, sold them some basics to get them on their way, but they're not where they need to be. I meet people all the time that have trusts, and I'll review their trust. It's a great trust. It's so well written. And I look at, I know the person that did this. He's a really good attorney. She's a really good attorney. You're in great hands. So what about the house? Did you ever put the house in the trust? Did you ever add your beneficiaries? No, I didn't know I had to do that. Right? So it's education. It's knowing the importance of things. It's taking those next steps. And I help people all the time. When I set up a trust, for example, for someone, or just the will and beneficiaries, we go through it. Here's the language you need to take to the bank. Here's the language you need to give to your investment advisor. Let me take care of the house. Let me do the deed for you or the transfer on death. I see this all the time, and people bring in their documents for me to review. And again, they don't know what they have. They don't know how it works. And I don't know where these attorneys get them, but it's always a gray binder. It must be something you can buy on Amazon. Must be. It's always a gray binder. And anytime someone walks into my office, I just sigh every time I see the gray binder. And mom has this trust, and she puts it on the shelf, and she tells her kids for years and years, don't worry, it's in a trust, it's all set up. There's a good chance that when mom passes away, they're going to grab that gray binder, and they're going to open it up, and they're going to realize later on after the fact that nothing was in the trust. So congratulations, you wasted all that time when you could have done something. So when the gray binder comes into my office, I know I'm going to be helping those people actually fund the trust, do the house, do the investments, those kind of things. There's a lot of attorneys, I think, get people halfway. They get them signed, they get them, make the check out to and get them out the door. There's a whole second part of estate planning that just people don't do.
So for those of us who are fortunate to still have parents with us and loved ones, how do we have these conversations in a tactful way to make sure that they have these things set up?
Yeah, and I definitely can recognize that it can be difficult. There's a lot of people, older people, that they are, they're in denial. Like, it's not going to happen to them. They don't want to think about this. I've had some people that they think if they think about their own mortality, they're going to make it. They're causing it to happen, right? I think if you have an older parent, you just say, look, we've got to get things squared away. You know, these are still your assets. You do whatever you want. Mom, I hope you live so long you spend all your money. That's, I mean, that's not how you raised us. You didn't raise us. We're not waiting for what's left when you're gone. But let's be able to take care of you. You know, if you start the conversation with mom of, hey, mom, we need to have that power of attorney so we can help you if you're in the hospital. Hey, mom, let's get that financial, that durable power of attorney so we can help you if we need to step in. And then, you know, mom, let's try to make this as simple for all the people that you leave behind. You know, maybe there's someone you want something to go to. Maybe there's someone you don't, right? Wouldn't it just be easy to have that in writing and taking some steps with like beneficiaries to make it as simple as possible? You know, older people don't want to do it again. Not because, you know, their own mortality, but they're also saying it's complicated, it's expensive. None of this is true. I mean, I make things simple and easy. And it's got to make sense. You got to appreciate what you have. And if you do that, just the sense of relief that people have, it's awesome to see it.
So when you mentioned if mom or dad has that gray binder, you know, on the shelf, and you pull it off the shelf, do they have their funeral arrangements in that, or is that something that shouldn't be part of the will, but something that should be separate, and why would that be important?
Yeah, well, so you got to think about, you know, when do things come up? So we talked about, you know, the powers of attorney, that's to help you when you're alive. The will and trust is to take care of things when you're gone. But there's that middle ground. You know, you've just passed away. You don't want to put any funeral stuff into a power of attorney, because the second you pass away, no one's going to look at those ever again. You know, and frankly, they'll probably end up in the trash. And there are stories where, you know, mom puts in her will, well, I want to be cremated. Okay. No one's going to look at that will for weeks until after she's passed away, because it's emotional. We're running around. I'd encourage people, pre-plan your funeral. Pre-plan it, you know.
Separate from the will.
Yeah.
And is that something you do, or is that separate?
Nope, I don't.
Okay.
I don't do that. You know, go to a funeral home, pre-plan your funeral, pay for it. It's a lot cheaper. When something does happen to you, your kids don't have to go through it, and your kids are going to be emotionally distraught. You know, the funeral director might be trying to upsell them on the Wi-Fi and the casket. You know, all the stuff you don't need. But it's really important to have a separate writing regarding, hey, this is what I want, cremation, burial. Again, the will example, you know, mom puts in the will, cremate me. Well, you know, no one knows. They have this beautiful burial at the cemetery. They release the doves, right? And then weeks later, they're like, that's not what you wanted, right? Put it separate. Cremate me, bury me, have the party at Lefts. Don't invite Tony, I never liked him. You know, spell out whatever you want. Again, you're writing your final chapter. What I tell people is, you know, keep all those documents together. When you leave my office, you don't walk out with a binder, because I hate the binder. But you're going to have a nice packet where everything's laid out. You know, you have you can do your final wishes. You have an asset list, so your kids know where your assets are, so they can go to the bank if you did beneficiaries. You know, they know where your investments are, your life insurance policies. It's technology is crazy good and crazy bad. You know, years ago when mom would pass away, all right, well, let's go to the house. We'll take turns. We'll get the mail. And, you know, a couple of months, we knew where all of our money was, right? You know, you and I can do my bill pay laying in bed watching TV, right? Everything's online. Well, that's going to make it harder for people, because we don't know where your stuff is. So it's super important to have a list of where your assets are.
And that's called an asset list?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And you provide that, or is that something that...
No, I tell people just set that up.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to know where your assets are. A lot of people give it to me so I can store it just to have a copy, but it has nothing to do, again, with the story planning. But you don't want to put specific assets into the documents, because it's going to change. You're going to open accounts, close accounts, buy a home, sell a home. And if you put it into your documents, well, then you're going to have to pay someone to modify and change those things. If your documents reference, hey, what do I have when I die, and you have your asset list with it, boom, work done. You can change it to your heart. Whenever things change, you change it. Passwords and usernames, those are super important too. Everybody does everything online, but it's working with me to get educated about all the things that you're just not going to think about. Simple steps, good results. That's what we got to do.
So we talked about a lot of stuff today, and I feel more knowledgeable myself about a lot of these topics and more confident to be able to talk to other people too about estate planning. So what would be 3 actionables that we could walk away with today?
Well, I would say, the first one is get motivated. It's coming for everybody. I'm 49, so statistically I'm closer to the end than the beginning. So realize that you need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of others. There is someone that you love and there's someone that loves you. I would say get organized. I meet so many people that the conversation starts, they say, well, I have a bank account. Okay. And as we start talking, then all of a sudden starts kicking in. Oh, yeah, I have life insurance. Oh, yeah, what about that 401k? I never moved it from my last job. Think about where your stuff is. Think about your beneficiaries. Go into the bank, putting the beneficiary on, right? And then it's just taking action. Reach out to me. I'd love to help you. Reach out to, if you have your own trusted circle of people, reach out to them too. No one is going to do this for you. And if you don't do anything, the state's going to do it for you. So it's pretty easy to fill in that gap and get off your butt and get it done.
Well, thank you for listening today, and remember to like and subscribe and share this conversation with somebody who could benefit from learning more about estate planning.